Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with AI expert, scientist, and co-CEO of Clickvoyant, Mia Umanos. She is the leader of an amazing Techstars-backed company and basically turns all the messy marketing data into clear, simple, do this now insights. Like if Google Analytics gave you actual advice instead of anxiety. Her whole thing is making data useful, especially for retailers and e-com brands who are juggling ROAS, LTV, conversion rates, and the like. She's not just about the numbers, though. She's all about turning those numbers into smarter decisions, more revenue, and a little less crying over the budgets. For a base in Colorado, we get into the story. Enjoy this interview. Let's begin our journey with this. 5 years ago, the pandemic changed our world inextricably. How did you get through it? How has it changed the way that you roll today?
Oh, the pandemic. That's interesting. Well, I was actually on a bit of a path during the pandemic. So I started my path to entrepreneurship around that time. So my background is in marketing analytics. I worked for Mattel, Toyota, all the big, like really big, like corporate companies. And my job is data science. And when you're a data scientist, back around that time, just before COVID, it was like New York Times, sexiest profession of the year. I think it was actually Harvard Business Review, not the New York Times. So, but they did say sexiest job of the year. And then, years later, it was just such a confused space. Science and mathematics is a lot like jazz. Like you just gotta understand it. And it takes a certain kind of brain that does understand, that can get the math, that enjoys it. It takes a kind of, certain brain to like free jazz, for example, right?
Yeah.
Versus like some, pretty easy Count Basie. And so, what my mission was to like, well, let's, all of these corporate companies are kind of floundering around, trying to figure out what to do with all their sexiest jobs and their sexy data scientists, that they were making virtually no progress in business.
Yeah.
And what I had done right around COVID was just before COVID, I had started a new business. It's an artificial intelligence that does the data science for a smaller business. Businesses that are usually boxed out of talent like me, because the job is so expensive, they can't really afford anybody. So right around that time, I was like, all right, you know what? I'm not going to I'm going to quit my big corporate job and I'm going to, build an AI that's going to make this available to companies of the middle and small size. And after COVID, it was almost solidified my resolve because so many businesses were hurting
Yeah.
after that. And the only way to survive and to work your way through is to understand your customer data, your business data, to figure out where am I gonna move now? That's when we're talking about like entrepreneurship is a lot like jazz in that you do have to improv, and COVID is an exact, this next coming wave of AI is another example. It's like you've gotta, there's a call and response to market and your business.
There certainly is. So let's get to the heart and soul of what you do on a daily basis. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of 12-year-olds. It's career day, and the kid in the back of the room is like, hey, what do you do for a living? What's your answer?
Mhm. I study people's behavior online. And so all of these things that you do, which is like looking at social media, testing these things, or, commenting, shopping, these kinds of things, it's leaving this sort of data exhaust that companies like to learn more about you. Now, there are some companies that do, negative things and nefarious things and untrustworthy things with that data. If you know the dark science, the dark arts of data science, that you can take a stance on what is right and wrong. And so my personal belief is that we're doing things to surprise and delight a digital experience, and we're not doing anything to harm. So we don't have a Hippocratic oath as data scientists like doctors do, but that's what I do.
So when you were 12 years old, what was your dream job, your ideal life?
Oh, my dream job was working as a scientist, actually. I was a big fan of studying animals, animal behavior. We had horses growing up. I was also a mall watcher when malls were a big thing. So I would sit down and get a Cinnabon with my dad and sit at the while my mom was shopping, and he would say, "Tell me about that person." Okay, tell me about this person. Tell me their story. We would just make up stories with people walking the mall. And I think that that's what got me into a place where I was like, I'm really, really interested in human behavior. So
So I'm curious, what were the foundational elements? Take me back to where you were born and raised. What was it about your childhood that planted these seeds of empiricism, of science, of being fascinated with human behavior and translating that into the AI digital realm as an adult? What were those seeds that were sown?
I, I grew up in a very small town of about 11,000 people. And in that small town, I was probably the only minority for a 45-mile radius. I moved to that small town from Chicago when I was about 7, and I could feel how different people were to, not only to me, but also to each other, or how people comported themselves in a neighborhood in Chicago versus how people comport themselves in a very small town in middle America, Indiana, was something that just captured my imagination and my curiosity. Like, why would it be like that? Why don't you know where the Philippines is? Why don't, what is my mother country? So that in combination with having no neighbors. So we also, my father was firstborn generation immigrant. We lived in the city. He grew up in the city. We moved to Green Acres basically and said, this is the American dream. So we had horses and no neighbors. So we had a lot of time, my brother and I, to think. We did not have digital devices. Video games were off limits until the weekend. And so there was a lot of thinking time. And in a small town, when you have a lot of thinking time and no neighbors, your curiosity just you all you have is who you are. The famous like know thyself, I think is harder and harder,
Yeah.
especially for kids. I'm raising kids too. And in a small town, when you have moved from a big city to a small town and you can view people and you have time to sit and process your thoughts, I think that's where the curiosity and the creativity of becoming. Do you know what I mean by that when I say
Yeah.
the creativity of becoming?
Yes. Absolutely.
So, the creativity of becoming is uninterrupted by any digital experience or neighbors or other kids when you live in a small town. And I think that's where the seeds were sown.
Who was the hero? Who was the inspirational force that's allowed you to not only find your place occupationally, but your proverbial place on this planet to evolve into who you are?
Wow. I mean, I'm 47 years old, so we're gonna have to go to, there's a lot of people on that timeline, Joe. But I would say, the very first person obviously is my dad. My father, classic like Bruce Lee archetype immigrant, right? If anybody asked him where's he from, he would say America. And even though and he, he had a bit of a chip on his shoulder about it, but he was an adventurer to the core. I mean, still is. And in our upbringing, I was given a dirt bike when I was 3, a motorized dirt bike with gasoline. Like, I can't even imagine giving this to even my 10-year-old right now. A dirt bike. We had done a lot of like, adrenaline type sports like skiing and snowboarding. And he even used to say, I don't know if you remember this brand, it was called No Fear. Do you remember
Oh
that brand
yeah,
from
of
the
course.
90s? Oh man,
Yes.
that was his like brand. At the beginning, we were taught that fear was not an obstacle. It's nothing, there is nothing to fear because fear just means that you're probably doing something right. So that's was step one. I think step two was as we, start to get to know other people from young adult, teenagers to young adulthood. It's really like, oh, is this right for me? Is that right for me? I mean, in high school, like I was in a girl group, like I was in an Asian girl group, hip hop B girl band. So it was like back in the days of In Living Color, if you remember that. And
Oh
so
yeah.
like I was in an all Asian, like, because it was like, this is great. I'm like hanging out with all Asian girls. So, that gave me kind of like a solid root in what it means to be Filipino. When I grew up in, Northwest Indiana, I thought, oh my gosh, this is something that we should be hiding. So that was a moment. I spent 9 years as a single woman. I used to call dating like I'm gonna add him to my quiver. Like this is my jazz guy, this is my dirt biking guy, this is my thing guy. So I'm gonna add him to my quiver. And that experience taught me a lot. But I will say that there is one person in particular in adulthood where I was, data science is forever changing. Technology is changing. As a result, we have to constantly be changing, learning new technologies, learning new languages, like, and that's again how that's also like jazz, because you're constantly responding to something that was introduced new. And there was a time when Shayna Boone, my director of data science, said, I told her, I said, ah, gosh, like I'm leadership, and I don't feel like I know the content as well as my team does because they're in it every day, and I'm up here leading. And she said, no one on the team can innovate like you do. Say all of these tools, all of these technology language, the technical proficiency can be taught. The innovation cannot be taught. And so that's why you're in this leadership role. And from there, it just kind of like opened the doors to allow me to go, okay, the combination of the camaraderie, the mall watching, the no fear, and the open door to say innovate was what led to on this path of entrepreneurship and inventing a SaaS product.
So, in the realm of science, what's one of your favorite scientific discoveries, developments?
That's an interesting question. I mean, one of the most influential people that that captured my imagination as a younger person is E.O. Wilson. He is oh gosh, I'm like gonna flub this now because it's a Friday morning and I haven't really had enough coffee, but it is called entomology, the study of bugs. And
Yeah.
he devoted his life to study ants. And in his books, where we talk about like colony behavior, things like hive mind, and how ants behave, were really interesting lessons on how humans do also behave, or how we can be so individualistic, particularly as an American culture, that we sometimes forget about the colony. So, no better time to talk about this than now. Plus, I've got my hip hop is bigger than government shirt.
Yes, I like
Um,
it.
but, growing up in the two places, kind of one foot in Asia and one foot in the United States culture. In Asian culture, you're very much a cog in a family. That is how you position yourself. In America, you are very much an individual. Do what you want to do. Follow your heart. Follow your gut. And I mean, you've seen these like sort of tropes around Hollywood, where it's like, oh, the Asian family is subservient, and then in the American family, they look down on that culture. But the studies by E.O. Wilson and ants help me sort of understand, like, you know what, it is very natural to to be a part of a whole rather than thinking of yourself I mean, consciousness in the United States, or consciousness as a human in general is difficult. It's a painful thing to deal with.
Yeah.
And so those are I mean, that's probably one of my favorite lessons.
So if you were to have a dream tonight and walk into your childhood home and run into a 16-year-old version of you, sit down in a chair across from her and like present a coffee table book and start thumbing through it. And that 16-year-old version of you is like, "What are we doing?" And you're like, "This is my life. This is how it turned out." Would that version of you believe it?
It's a really good question. Um, I don't know. I think the I've been in love with science since I was a little kid, and I think that my 16-year-old self would believe it, but also be skeptical.
Yeah.
And if there could be one thing that I could teach my 16-year-old self to do, as deeply interested in science as she is, that intuition is actually stronger than things that can be empirically recorded.
Yeah. Well said. So when you think about your life as a scientist, as an entrepreneur, there's an amount of risk that goes into getting where you want to be in life. What's the
Hmm.
biggest risk that you've taken professionally?
Oh man, I mean, it's definitely entrepreneurship. I mean, I've taken lots of risk when it was somebody else's money, right? That's easy.
Yeah.
When I'm working in a big corporation, I'll fight for like, budget. I'll fight for this. I mean, like I'll take big risks and go, I'm big risk, big reward. And I've made a lot of successes for those corporations. But when it's your own money, it's very daunting. Like we raised, I've never done a fundraise before, but we raised VC money in a traditional like pitch for 6 months. I raised 1.2 million dollars in a 6 month time period. I had never seen that much money in a bank account before. As a American immigrant daughter, the best you can do in your life is to get a job, go to college, get a job, and pay for your kids' college, right? Buy a house. That's the American dream. And so when I took a step out of that, there was very deep cultural roots telling me this was stupid. That's dumb. You've got a good corporate job. You got really good benefits. You have a good pension. What the hell is wrong with you? That was probably the biggest risk. But
Yeah.
honestly, I feel like that risk allowed me to become more of myself than I ever let myself be. Because you have to do so many new things. There's so many different skill sets. You could be a VP of data science at one of these big corporations, but you have so much shielding, the vulnerability that it requires to become an entrepreneur. I'm like, not everybody's got it.
Yeah. So of everything that you've accomplished and become and evolved to at this point in your life, what are you the proudest of?
I'm proudest of my spiritual growth, Joe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm proudest of my spiritual growth. I think that that actually the catalyst for that was being an entrepreneur, and entrepreneurship requires you to change character in a way that really just shakes you to your core. And I came from a very Catholic and well, Catholic Baptist background. My dad was Baptist, my mother was Catholic, and so theology was a little bit loose in our house, which allowed me to explore other meanings. And so, even recently, like I'm digging back into the crates for, my Alice Coltrane and, understanding like what does it mean to me to be connected to spirit and also taking time intentionally to do that in a way that I didn't think that I needed before entrepreneurship.
It's funny you mentioned Alice. I had a birthday Monday, and I share a birthday with Terry Gibbs, who's a vibraphone
Okay.
player. He's 101, still alive, still kicking, very fiery. And he went on tour with John Coltrane at one point, and it was around the time he was in New York where him and Alice just met. And he said he used to look in the back of the room when they would play, and Alice was painfully shy, and she would be in like a little phone booth trying to hide but being visible. And he watched John and Alice fall in love. And I think about that spiritual component because, some of his seminal albums were all
Hmm.
kind of spiritual hymns. And his level, there's a documentary on Netflix about him, his level of merging this reality we live in with spirituality, with idealism, with creative buoyancy as a jazz musician, all fused together into something that was almost blinding for people to even talk about because he figured it
Hmm.
out. And there's a level of like chlorides in his blood and with these jazz legends where they just figure it out. They hum at a different level. So that level of spirituality is just kind of interwoven into what he was and who he was, And that's
Yeah.
Alice too.
And, and that's amazing. I mean, I think for a kid, like, I mean, growing up, listening to jazz, in the back of my grandpa's Cadillac, and having these two places together, science and jazz, they seem somewhat disparate, but it actually is all one.
Yeah.
And that's where, when I say, oh, I would definitely tell my 16-year-old self that intuition, spirituality does have a place in science. And that's another reason why I love E.O. Wilson, because he's deeply Christian
Yeah.
and talks. And so I think that like that combination of spirituality and discovery, you can't really have one without the other.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, Mia, everyone has a perception of you. Family, friends, clients, colleagues, everyone that knows you, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Oh, Um, I think I'm definitely well, I'm light as a feather. I am socially and emotionally aware, and I'm a person just focused on living at the highest vibration possible, while honoring like the pain in anyone else and the divinity in everyone else.
So if anyone wants to learn more about Clickvoyant, you, any of the good work going on in your world, where is the best place for them to go?
Oh, I mean, I'm all over. So the best place for them to go if they want to learn about Clickvoyant is in LinkedIn, which is our professional social space. But if they want to hear about, our thoughts in AI and how I'm raising my teenagers during in shepherding them into the AI era, they can listen to our podcast called AI Kid You Not. And strangely, you can actually Google Mia Umanos and find my old SoundClouds. So, and old MySpace. Like it's all out there. I've been living out loud for 20 years. So,
I love it. I love it.
yeah.
Well, we're of that ilk where we were there in the beginning. Before MySpace became Facebook and all of those things, it was all live. That was the
Yep.
beginning, for
Yep.
sure.
So you can see all the playlists that we used to put up on MySpace. That's still out there. We were not careful.
That's okay. That's why we're young. So, Mia, this has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for your story. Thank you for your time. Continued success. I love your spirit. I love what you're doing. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe. Have a wonderful weekend.
You too.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, spirituality, music, and more from around the globe. Our esteemed theme music was composed and produced by the great E.E. Pointer of Kansas City's River Cow Orchestra. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.